Hi, history students. Happy Veterans Day. At the end of class, we'll go over a little bit of the history of veterans and a little video dedicated to all those who have fought and their families. All right, so your journal is up on the board right here. It says, what role do you think the United States should play in foreign countries? You can pause it, or hopefully it's been written on the board. If not, just pause the video and make sure you write in your journal. All right, so last section before we review. So debating America's new role. And this is still today something very controversial. So we're talking still early 1900s. While the United States' new imperial role in the world excited many Americans, others were strongly opposed to the new level of international involvement. Naturally, you can imagine that people were concerned and nervous about having to police the world and take care of everybody else when we're struggling at home. Anti-imperialists in 1898, opponents of the United States policy in the Philippines established the Anti-Imperialist League. Many of these organizers were well known. You have William Jennings Bryan, you have Jane Addams, you have Mark Twain. Remember the settlement houses where they would take over like a mansion, and then they would have services for those that were poor and struggling. Jane Addams was the one who was a leader of that. And Mark Twain, you should know from your history classes from reading like Huckleberry Finn. All right, imperialism, they argued, was a rejection of nation's foundation of liberty for all. So they said, hey, get out of other people's business. One of our Republican senators said, we regret that it has become necessary in the land of Washington and Lincoln to reaffirm that all men of whatever race or color are entitled to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Something that we value a lot, right? So opponents also pointed out that the Constitution must follow the flag. Annexed territories should be entitled to the same rights of other United States citizens. So at this time, we had the Philippines, who we claimed as a territory, Hawaii, we had Puerto Rico and Guam and Virgin Islands and Mariana Islands. We have a lot that we have taken care of. Obviously, we only kept the Philippines until 1946, right after World War II. All right, Samuel Gompers, famous labor, you guys know this from chapter 7 during chapter 6 from the Industrial Revolution, union organizer pointed out that the most of Hawaiians worked for much less than American laws required. So he was a big proponent for the workers. He was the big push for collective bargaining and holding employers responsible. All right, so breakdown of democracy. Opponents worried that imperialism threatened the very nature of democracy within the continental United States. The large standing armies that were used to control new colonies could also be used to crush dissent at home. Another thing, remember the Jim Crow laws we're still living through at this time period. Basically said separate but equal, as long as you provide a school for the colored people, then and there's one for the white. That means they're equal. Are the schools equal? No. Are their quality the same? No. Do the African American children have a bus to ride to school? No. And that's what come back to bite them in the 1950s and why it was overturned. People saw racism as a cause or justification of imperialism. Had the Filipinos been white and fought as bravely as they have, the war would have been ended and their independence granted a long time ago. Many white Southerners actually opposed imperialism because of their racism. They feared that taking on new territories would eventually mean different races and ethnicities of people would move to the United States. Some also argued in terms of economics. Some thought expansion wasn't economically viable. Maintaining new levels of armed forces would require additional taxation, possible even mandatory military. Make sure you write down economic arguments and racism arguments. I don't know why I don't have it in yellow. I apologize. Samuel Gompers argued that laborers coming to the United States from annexed territories would also compete for American jobs. So this is kind of the biggest concern in terms of economics. Are we going to be able to take care of the people that we've, added as territories? And also, there's going to be competition in the United States because we consider them a citizen now. So now if you look at it in terms of imperialism, despite opposing arguments, imperialism maintained a powerful momentum in the American public. In 1890, the American frontier had officially been declared closed. Imperialism seemed to offer a new frontier for the country. Here's a supporter. Most Americans thought that practical advantage of expanding marketplaces, so different resources from different locations, like diamonds in South Africa or rubber in Africa was another big one. Oil in the Middle East. These are resources that will benefit us and have different markets that we don't have necessarily as efficient and as much in the United States. And strategic military opportunities outweighed the argument for isolationism. So we needed to have Hawaii, we needed to have Midway in our mind so that we could use these as stepping stones to other parts of the world when needed if we were to battle. And we'll come to find out in World War II, we're going to need Midway, we're going to need Hawaii. Unlike the empires, the United States empire has dominated primarily through economic control and foreign investment. My husband was in Afghanistan and he flew up north to Bagram and they had a McDonald's there. And this is in the middle of theater, they're fighting. So you know that the United States influences worldwide. In 1907, Roosevelt sent the part of the United States Navy on a cruise around the world. The trip was meant to be an impressive display of the world's most powerful Navy ships. The ships made big impressions all over the world and became known as the Great White Fleet. So how do people view us, right? I was talking to somebody and they said, basically, when you go to Australia, don't let them know that you're an American because they think that we're pretty full of ourselves and they won't like us. Many annexed territories became resentful of America, which is still today. You go to different countries that are not the touristy part, it's just the areas, and they are not as friendly. Even up in Alaska, my son was treated with not excitement, you could say. In Latin America, and it's part of the United States, but still there's people that are native of that country or that state. In Latin America, the cry Yankee, go home became popular. Other nations began to recognize America's new power and began turning to them for help. So we have both sides, hey, they're a powerful country, they'll benefit us. And then you have the people like, hey, don't get in our face. We don't like you. We think that you're pompous and you're full of yourself. All right, so that's all that we're going to talk about. And that is also on your team. So if you want to go back and take notes on that, that might be a wise choice because some of it is not highlighted for some unknown reason. But I am going to show you a couple videos on Veterans Day and what Veterans Day history. And then what I would like you to do is study your states and capitals test. And then I can also share your review. So if you want to get ahead of your review.
In the United States, November 11th is recognized as Veterans Day. What is Veterans Day? Why is it celebrated on November 11th? In the early morning hours of November 11th, 1918, the Allied powers, which included France, Great Britain, the United States, and many others, agreed with Germany to end the fighting during World War I. Later that day, an official armistice or ceasefire was signed. In fact, the armistice was signed in Paris at 11 a.m. on November 11th of 1918, the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month. This date was almost instantly recognized as being an important one. The following year, in 1919, many nations declared November 11th a national holiday. The day became known as Armistice Day and honored those who had died during the war. Many nations still honor Armistice Day, and the focus of the holiday is placed on soldiers who have lost their lives, similar to the American holiday of Memorial Day. There are several different traditions associated with Armistice Day. For example, some nations still observe a moment of silence, usually for 2 minutes, at 11 o'clock in the morning. The first minute is said to honor the millions who died during World War I. The second minute is for the living who were also affected by the war, including wives, parents, and children. There are also significant ceremonies which take place in South Africa and Australia, as both nations were profoundly impacted by World War I. In South Africa, they observe the moment in darkness as well as silence. In Australia, instead of 11 o'clock a.m., they observe their moment of silence at 9 o'clock p.m. This is because at 9 o'clock p.m. in Australia, it is 11 o'clock a.m. in Paris. In other nations, the nature and focus of the holiday changed after the conclusion of World War II. At that point, Great Britain began referring to the day as Remembrance Day. In America, the holiday became Veterans Day. However, in the United States, Veterans Day has grown to recognize all of those who have served their country, whether living or dead, and even honors those still serving. A World War II veteran, Raymond Weeks, was the first to propose the notion of recognizing all veterans on this day. He approached Dwight Eisenhower with the idea, and it was eventually presented as a bill before Congress. Veterans Day was recognized as an official holiday on May 26, 1954. Today, Raymond Weeks is remembered by some as the father of Veterans Day. At first, Veterans Day continued to be celebrated on November 11th. However, in 1971, it was briefly moved to the fourth Monday in October. It remained on that day until 1978, when it was returned to the November 11th date. Today, Veterans Day is recognized across the United States and is observed on the 11th of November each year. Americans all over the country join with many others around the world to honor those who have served in the military.
And then this last one I'd like you to watch also. Hold on.
We made USAA insurance for this season. When being a fan on a budget gets tough, our agents do the legwork so saving on auto insurance is easy. USAA. What you're made of, we're made for.
Raise your right hand and repeat after me. I state your name. Do solemnly swear to support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic, and to bear true faith and allegiance to the same. That I will obey the orders of the President of the United States and the orders of those officers appointed over me according to regulations and the Uniform Code of Military Justice. So help me God.
We celebrate Veterans Day on the anniversary of the armistice that ended World War I. The armistice that began on the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month. The timing of this holiday is quite deliberate in terms of historical fact. But somehow it always seems quite fitting to me that this day comes deep in autumn, when the colors are muted and the days seem to invite contemplation. It is, in a way, an odd thing to honor those who died in defense of our country, in defense of us, in wars far away. The imagination plays a trick. We see these soldiers in our mind as old and wise, but most of them were boys when they died, and they gave up two lives, the one they were living and the one they would have lived. When they died, they gave up their chance to be husbands and fathers and grandfathers. They gave up their chance to be revered old men. They gave up everything for our country, for us. And all we can do is remember. I will not fail thee, nor forsake thee. In memory of those who gave the last full measure of devotion, may our efforts to achieve lasting peace gain strength. Let us make a vow to our dead. Let us show them by our actions that we understand what they died for. Strengthened by their courage, heartened by their value, and born for their memory. Let us continue to stand for the ideals for which they lived and died.
In the long history of the world, only a few generations have been granted the role of defending freedom in its hour of maximum danger. I do not shrink from this responsibility. I welcome it. I do not believe that any of us would exchange places with any other people or any other generation. The energy, the faith, the devotion which we bring to this endeavor will unite our country and all who serve it. We shall pay any price, bear any burden, meet any hardship, support any friend, oppose any foe to assure the survival and the success of liberty.
All right, we have about 30 minutes left, but I wanted to make sure that you were having had a clear understanding of what Veterans Day is, and thank all those veterans out there. Make sure you thank one today in particular. So you have a long time to study and to work on your history of me and finish up. So I found a states and capital lyrics, and I want you to watch it, or you can study on your own, but this is something that maybe you can learn by watching.
The Daily Double. Wacko, you can wager all or part of your money. Blow the wad. All right then. In the category of the United States, the answer is the names of all 50 states and their capitals. Okay. Here goes.
Baton Rouge, Louisiana, Indianapolis, Indiana, and Columbus is the capital of Ohio. There's Montgomery, Alabama, south of Helena, Montana. Then there's Denver, Colorado, under Boise, Idaho. Texas has Austin, then we go north to Massachusetts, Boston, and Albany, New York. Tallahassee, Florida, and Washington, D.C. Santa Fe, New Mexico, and Nashville, Tennessee. Elvis used to hang out there a lot, you know. Trenton's in New Jersey, north of Jefferson, Missouri. You got Richmond in Virginia, South Dakota has Pierre. Harrisburg's in Pennsylvania, and Augusta's up in Maine. And here is Providence, Rhode Island, next to Dover, Delaware. Concord, New Hampshire, just a quick jaunt to Montpelier, which is up in Vermont. Hartford's in Connecticut, so pretty in the fall. And Kansas has Topeka, Minnesota has St. Paul. Juneau's in Alaska, and there's Lincoln in Nebraska, and it's Raleigh out in North Carolina, and then there's Madison, Wisconsin, and Olympia in Washington, Phoenix, Arizona, and Lansing, Michigan. Here's Honolulu, Hawaii's a joy, Jackson, Mississippi, and Springfield, Illinois, South Carolina with Columbia down the way, and Annapolis in Maryland on Chesapeake Bay. They have wonderful clam chowder. Cheyenne is in Wyoming, and perhaps you make your home in Salt Lake City out in Utah where the buffalo roam. Atlanta's down in Georgia, and there's Bismarck, North Dakota, and you can live in Frankfurt in your old Kentucky home. Salem in Oregon, from there we join. Little Rock in Arkansas, Iowa's got Des Moines, Sacramento, California, Oklahoma and its city, Charleston, West Virginia, and Nevada, Carson City. That's all the capitals there are. Huh?
Oh, I'm so sorry. You failed to put your response in the form of a question.
All right, so make sure you study and you're ready for the test. It's going to be next Tuesday.